So I guess we'll kind of sort of pseudo start here. Who are you and how did you get into doing what you do?
Oh, you want the 3-minute elevator? Okay,
Sure, yeah.
sure. My name is Colin Cameron. I am an agent with eXp Realty, and I own a media company called Small Town Agents with my partner Jim Ling. I have been doing real estate for somewhere between 7 and 8 years right now. Um, Gotten really, really fortunate. From July to July, I sold over 90 homes. Um, yeah, been really lucky to be somewhere around the top 10, top 20 in York and Adams for the last 3 years now.
Nice.
Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, my style is just to shoot straight, be as down to earth as possible. What I'm wearing right now is probably what you'll see me wearing when I see you.
Hmm.
I am not a shirt and tie guy. I think that is intimidation all the way,
Hmm.
intentional or unintentional. And when you're going to spend $200,000-300,000, it needs to be friendly.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely need to be able to like be on the down low and trust the person that you're talking to, that they're not gonna, yeah, that they're not trying to cheat you.
Yeah, there's no like cloak and dagger or shadow and mirrors. It's just, this is what I am. I am what I am, and I just want to see you in a good situation,
Hmm.
whether it's buying or selling a home. I try to have fun with what I do. When I
Hmm.
show houses, I love to make jokes. The way I frame it is, as an agent, I'm really just Big Brother.
Hmm.
I've been around the block. I've seen this, I've seen that, I've seen the other things, and I'll give you the advice, whether you take it or not. It's the advice I'm proctoring to you.
There we go. Oh my gosh. So when you do you tend to focus like more on helping people buy a home, sell a home, or a little bit of both?
I'm pretty much 50-50.
50/50.
Yep, my partner and I, we're pretty much 50-50 of buy sell. Um, a lot of that is my age, though, just in the
Mhm.
sense that the archetype that I typically work with is, I'm 34, my partner I think is 36. So
Mhm.
we get a lot of what's called the move up buyer,
Mm.
meaning that somebody has something to sell to buy. So it's kind of an equal exchange in terms of being a 50-50 split down the middle for buying and
Mhm.
selling. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Have you ever done something like where you're like selling a person's house and also like looking for their new house at the same time?
Yep. And that's
Okay.
that's exactly what a move up buyer is. So it's somebody
Okay.
has to sell their house to go purchase their new house.
Okay.
And that's usually just like a place of life thing. It's usually somebody late 20s,
Hmm.
early 40s. It's a broad skew.
Yeah.
Um, I cover all bases. I do estates, I do first time buyers, I do anything you can think of, multi-units, a little bit of commercial. But if you name it, I've probably sold it in some fashion.
Oh, wow. Does that include like land, or is that like for people to build on, or is that more of like a different like area?
Sure, I've sold plenty of raw land. There's a lot of dynamics to raw land. Be careful when you buy raw land.
Hmm.
But yes,
Yeah,
every
from what I've heard.
literally any type of real property you can think of, I've
Oh,
probably
wow.
sold it in some fashion.
My goodness.
So
So what's like what kinds of like questions or things do you like need from that you want to ask people or need from people when they're looking to buy or sell?
sure. So that's a great question to start. So uh, if you are purchasing, we'll start with that.
Hmm.
There's step one or step two, and either of those can come first.
Hmm.
Step one and step two is, did you talk to a lender and have you found an agent? And it can be either or. Okay.
Okay.
Do not start looking unless you've gotten qualified with a lender. Why? Because that house could be gone tomorrow and you're not qualified. Why else? You might be looking at something you're not qualified for. Why else? It may require a lot more money than you realize. You may be capable of it, but it may be outside of your comfort zone. You're not going to know all of
Yeah.
these different mechanics unless you actually talk to a lender. It can feel scary to talk to a lender. A lot of people will say, hey, I want to find the house before I talk to a lender.
Hmm.
Not how it works. No, no, no.
Ah.
Um, it's kind of like if you're at a chessboard and you're at table view and you're looking at the back of the pieces, you're only looking forward. The way you got to handle real estate is you got to go on top and you got to look down. And to look
Uh-huh.
down, you got to have all of the information so you can build a battle plan, right?
Yeah.
You can't step into it unprepared. You know, and then, you know, when it comes to an agent, you know, find an agent that you can relate to, that you like, that you're comfortable with. You're going to spend a lot of time with them and you're going to have to trust them. They're literally helping you spend probably the most money you're ever going to spend. So you should make sure you like them. You should make sure that you trust them. You should make sure you have a
Hmm.
rapport with them. If you're interviewing them, that's perfectly fine. It's okay. If somebody rings me up and be like, hey, you know, I'm trying to get paired with an agent. I'm looking to buy a house. I've already talked to XYZ lender. Can we just grab a coffee sometime so we can get to know each other and make sure it's a good fit?
Uh-huh.
I love that. I
Oh,
absolutely love that.
that's so
I,
neat.
yes, for me to sit down and spend an hour of my time with somebody and grab a coffee and relay to them some of the stuff I'm going to relay to you guys tonight,
Mhm.
that's ideal. You know, one of my philosophies is that the best way to empower my clients is to educate them. I don't want anybody to feel like they don't know what's going to happen in the next step of the transaction. I said a second ago when we were talking before this started was I
Mhm.
go for the spaghetti on the wall effect, right? I try to
Mhm.
tell you as much as I can in an hour when we're grabbing that coffee. I'll even buy that coffee. I don't care. But I want you to know that as we're going through the process, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. We talked about that. I
Mhm.
want that to click. I don't want it to feel like you've pulled open the choose your own adventure book and all of a sudden you're on page 68 and you walked off the bridge. You don't want
Yeah.
that, you know, like I want you to anticipate what's going to happen next. I want you to
Mhm.
ask me questions. I want you to text me when you have that burning question in the back of your head and it's keeping you up at night so I can
Mhm.
answer it so you can go to sleep. Like I want those things. I want people to understand it. You know, for me, I think where most agents fail is they just don't take that hour to teach
Mhm.
them the process,
Yeah.
period. And for somebody like me, it's the best way to build rapport. It's the best way to build trust. And it's the best way to show people who I am, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it'll save you a lot of time because I can educate you about the market in that period and all of that stuff and what's going to happen after A, B, and C happen.
Mhm.
That's it. It's get the playbook. Get the playbook.
Yeah.
Um, so you've talked to a lender, you found an agent. The very first question I ask somebody when I sit down with them and I grab a coffee, what kind of monthly payment do you want?
That's a big
Right?
one.
It's a real big one, because one of my credos as Big Brother is, hey, you told me you wanted $1,500 a month, but we're looking at a house that's $1,800 a month.
Mhm.
Are you sure? Because that goes against what you told me,
Mhm.
right? Because I want to keep you in your comfort zone so that you're comfortable. I
Yeah.
don't want to stretch you. I don't want to push you for any minute, right? Um, so versus price point, you know, in this area particularly, your payment matters versus the price point, right? And that
Yeah.
might sound outlandish. And the reason for that is because we are a Commonwealth. We are one of 4 states in the country that are a Commonwealth.
Oh.
And it's a really weird system. We, unlike most states, you know, I think Adams County has 7 or 8 school districts. I think it's 7.
Yeah,
We
something
have
like
different
that.
we have different tax sets for each school district. That is unusual. We have
Oh.
different tax sets for each township. We have different tax sets for each county, right? Whereas in Maryland, you have one county, one school system, right?
Yes, the death with one stab as opposed to the thousand little pinpricks.
Well, kind of, yeah, because, you know, particularly too in Pennsylvania, work with a local agent because somebody who's not from this area is not going to understand the tax sets. The tax sets affect your payment, right? So you can be in York County, and you can be an FHA buyer with 3.5% down and looking at a $200,000 house, and we'll say XYZ school district. In York County, your tax set is close to 3% of value. Whereas if you shift over to Adams County, your tax set is closer to 2% of value. That dramatically affects your payment,
Mhm.
dramatically. So in all reality, a lot of times you can look at a house that's $200,000 in York County and then look at a house that's $230,000 in Adams County, and the payment's the same.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is so weird.
Yeah, oh, it's absolutely, and it's a lot of limboing.
Mhm.
So that's why I say, hey, you know, what payment do you want, right? Because then I can guide you the best way possible when we're doing that limbo act. Um, because those taxes, they matter quite a bit. Um, The other thing too is just briefly the types of programs that are out there. I'll just go over the big
Hmm.
four,
The big
right?
four. Okay.
The big four. So in terms of financing, mm, outside of cash, which if you have cash, good for you. That's fantastic.
But who,
Most
but
people,
in
most people don't.
reality, most people don't have $200,000, $300,000 in cash just lying around.
No, no, it's very rare. And I will tell you, that's the golden goose to a listing agent when somebody says, I have cash. It just cuts out a lot of the steps.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're in a competitive scenario and you lose to cash, you cannot be upset about it. It's what it is. And it's rare. It's very rare.
Yeah.
So the number one program would be a conventional loan. There's all kinds of conventional loans out there. There are 3% conventional loans. There's 20% conventional loans. The benefit to a 20% conventional loan is that you don't have what's called PMI. So PMI is a mortgage premium that you pay. Essentially, it is foreclosure insurance that you pay for the bank in case you foreclose. Yeah. So if you have 20% to put down, you can avoid that. And on a house, we'll say that's $250,000. That could be $80 to $100 a month, just for that foreclosure insurance. The other thing too is that conventional loans are easier to work with. They don't have as many requirements for property standards. And by property standards, I mean things that the appraiser could call out and say, you need to repair this. The next type of loan would be an FHA loan, which most people refer to as the first-time homebuyer loan. It's really not. Anybody can use it. It doesn't really matter. That program is 3.5%. That one is, credit score wise, credit scores are weird.
They are.
But generally like a 580 to 600 range is your play ball range for an FHA. And that would be the one with the lowest credit score requirement. Other thing too, before I move on, most interest rates right now are hovering around 3%, depending on your individual profile. Your interest rate is determined by your debt to income, meaning how much money is coming in and how much money is going out, and also what your credit score is. Those are two of the biggest factors in determining that. Keep in mind, I'm not a lender. I'm just a guy who knows a little bit about a lot of things.
You still need to know something about it because people are going to have questions about that, and this is a thing that requires a lot of money.
Bingo. And an agent's job in this, aside from being big brother, is I'm the spider to the spider web, right? So I'm the one who connects, communication with the lender, to the title company, to the inspector, to the appraiser, to the insurance agent. I'm the one in the middle who's doing all the communication to spread it out to everybody else.
Yeah.
So I do have to know a little bit about everything, but I simply said that because I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
Right. So FHA 3.5%, that does have PMI, and that would be for the life of the loan unless you were to refinance, period. Okay. The next one would be a USDA loan. USDA loans are really cool. They do require a slightly higher credit score. You need to be somewhere around a 640, 650. And then that also factors in your debt to income. But it is a 0% down loan. Yeah. And the interest rate is actually slightly lower than FHA, just slightly. That's because the actual, so the PMI that I keep mentioning, the mortgage premium, the interest rate on that mortgage premium is actually slightly lower than FHA. Big picture stuff. Doesn't really matter though. It's very marginal. But a USDA loan is cool because it's zero down. But there are restrictions for income. There are restrictions for credit score. There are restrictions for location. So you kind of got to fit it into the map, right? So here locally, pretty much Hanover Borough is not eligible whatsoever. 90% of Adams County is eligible. There's pretty much only parts of McSherrystown and New Oxford that are not eligible for that program. The easiest way to find out if a property is USDA able is you can type in, you can literally type in USDA approval, right? And it'll bring up the government looking link. You can click on it and you go through the prompts and you type in the address. Green is good, red is bad. Period.
That sounds simple enough.
It's super, super simple. And it's just USDA eligibility. If you just Google that, boom, you'll get it right away. It's probably the third or fourth link. There'll be ads and stuff first. Just ignore them. And that'll tell you if a property is eligible. And not only that, there is an income restriction on that one. um, within York and Adams, it's somewhere between 90 and 95,000 for total household income. It cannot exceed that.
Uh-huh.
So it is generally for like one household income earners.
Yeah.
So in that sense, so they are trying to place more people in more rural areas that have, for the most part, a one income earner. Granted, there are plenty of families that, can still fit
Uh-huh.
within that cap.
Yeah. Especially
So
if both income earners are on the lower spectrum of the income scale.
certainly, or just like two younger people just starting out, that kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Um, the other program that is most common as well is a VA loan. Obviously, you have to have served, whether it's Navy, military, Army, whatever it is, right? That is also a 0% down loan. And that is a benefit you get for serving, which obviously you deserve 100%. The big thing about the government loans, and
Uh-huh.
government loans being FHA, USDA, and VA, those three loans, is they have property standards. I mentioned before, conventional are easier to work with. So with
Yeah.
these government loans, you're going to have property standards where the appraiser can walk out and say, hey, I really need you to correct this. Generally, it's safety issues. So it could be like a
Uh-huh.
tripping hazard. It could be like a non-uniform outlet. So like they might want a
Uh-huh.
GFC outlet, which is a safety outlet.
Yeah.
They might want a handrail on a set of stairs, those kind of
Uh-huh.
things. Generally pretty minor repairs, but an annoyance nonetheless if you're the seller and you got to go back and make those repairs.
Uh-huh. And that means more money and more time before you can actually sell it.
Correct. And also too, there's certain types of properties you just couldn't go after because of that.
Yeah.
Generally, most short sales and foreclosures, you're not going to want to use a government loan with it because the bank's not going to make your repairs,
Uh-huh.
period. And so if you get flagged for XYZ, you're not allowed on the property to make those repairs, and they're not willing to do the repairs, then you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So the general process of buying from start to finish is agent, lender, and then you start shopping. You start looking. Most agents will set you up on what's called a portal where, it sends you whatever school district, whatever area you're looking at in your price range.
Uh-huh.
It'll give you automated emails. You check it out, you text your agent. You're like, hey, what do you think of this one? And they're going to say, hey, here's my concerns. Here's what I like about it. Here's what I don't like about it. Or I think this is pushing your budget. Let me run this with the lender to make sure we're within the range. Or,
Uh-huh.
hey, I think that thing's stellar. Let's go check it out. Most agents will ask for a night's notice to book a showing. We are people too.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
every
No,
once in
let's go at 4 a.m. Like, no, no, we can't do that.
you'd be surprised.
Oh my God.
You'd be
I'll have to ask for
surprised.
some horror stories.
Yeah, well, and every once in a while, if like, if it's noon and they're like, hey, this property is amazing, we're like, hey, I could actually get out there at 6. Every once in a while, I'll throw that out there. That's
Mhm.
just me. But generally, a nice notice is the best way to do it. And especially if it's occupied, those people
Yeah.
too that are selling the house, if they got a 6 and an 8-year-old coming home from elementary school and you want to see the house at 7 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, that's tough. That's tough. They need some notice, right?
Mhm.
That way they can go to Dairy Queen that night instead of being at home, right? So just in general, if it's an occupied property, they will want a night's notice also. So that's
Mhm.
also part of that. If
Yeah.
it's vacant, you can go out there anytime.
Mhm.
Um, so you look at houses, for me, my kind of comfort level, people usually understand the process, understand houses, and are comfortable with what they're looking at, somewhere between 7 to 10 houses in.
Mhm.
That's when you start to feel grounded in the process. Any good agent, while you're looking at properties, they're going to start pointing out things. They're going to say, hey, this is the type of shingle on this roof, or hey, like this foundation is a little concerning, or hey, this is on oil heat. That can be really expensive. You got to factor that into your budget, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Little things
definitely.
like that. You're going to learn while you're touring houses with your agent. Any agent is going to take the time to demonstrate their knowledge to you and their concerns while they're going through the house.
Mhm.
What I keep reinforcing with you is education. That's it, right? Is making sure you feel comfortable with what's going on. So say you find the house, you love it, you want to write an offer. And then somebody like me is going to go, okay, well, let me run numbers with the lender. Let me get a pre-approval. Let me then go run comparable sales. So that would be past sales in that school district, similar types of home, within 20, 30% of the square footage of that house.
Mhm.
That way I can say, hey, you're making a great investment, or hey, you might be overpaying for this thing.
Yeah.
So that you know what you're getting into. And then from there, we talk about terms, types of sorry, types of inspections, timelines, type of financing, and items staying behind conveyances, right?
Mhm.
Also referred to as chattel.
Ah.
Yeah, isn't that a fun word?
Your fridge is chattel. That's excellent.
Kind of. Uh, chattel would be more like I'm leaving that dresser behind.
Ah,
It's
gotcha.
more like weird.
More like
Most people.
furniture rather than like appliances.
Yeah, like most
Gotcha.
people expect a stove, they expect,
Mhm.
those kind of things that are built into the kitchen.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's some oddities that they want to leave behind that it would be called chattel, right? Um, so you put together this offer, you've elected for a home inspection, and pest, radon, all of that stuff.
Mhm.
If you are on private utilities, meaning a well and septic, you're going to want to get those
Mhm.
checked out too. Those are big ticket items. And you also
Definitely.
want to make sure you're not drinking poop water. That's gross.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's not cool. Especially if it's an older house that may have, maybe the plumbing isn't quite up to modern snuff.
Bingo. And, if you're using a government loan and you're on a well, you're going to have to get the water checked anyway.
Hmm.
The government wants to know you're not drinking lead or poop water or anything like that.
Yeah.
And most of the time, when it comes to water, it's easy corrections.
Hmm.
And then a septic, you obviously got to check it because that's $30,000 to $40,000 if it fails. That's if it's a
Yeah.
complete failure, it is
Hmm.
a gut punch.
Yeah.
Um, do the best you can to get inspections. Do the
Hmm.
best you can. Sometimes the seller just won't allow it. Sometimes a house is just as is, where is, and you're going to go in blind.
Hmm.
That's scary. You're going to spend a lot of money. You should know what you're getting
Yeah,
into, right? So
definitely.
I encourage all my clients to get the inspections, period. If you're in a super, super competitive offer, say there's 8 offers, the farthest I'll ever go is, hey, we'll do inspections with info only, and you have the right to walk away if we're not comfortable with what we find.
Hmm.
That way, you're just spending the money on the inspection to check under the hood. If you don't like what's under the hood, then you just walk, you get to keep your deposit, all that stuff,
Hmm.
right? So we organize this offer. I'll send it to you and I'll say, hey, I sent it to you to review. If you want to jump on a Zoom like this, I'm happy to go over it with you, explain it page by page.
Hmm.
Some people take me up on that, some people don't, right? Again, I want people to understand what they're getting into. We send out that offer to the other agent. Usually a response time is like 24 hours. So if we send it out tonight on a Tuesday, I would expect an answer probably Wednesday night. Okay. Um, then we find out, we go from there. So we get terms together, we go under contract. Then what's going to happen is we're going to reach out. We're going to say, hey, you need to put down a deposit. So deposit in our state is typically 1%. It's called good faith money and or
Yeah.
escrow. Okay.
Hmm.
So, or good faith money rather. So
Yeah.
1%. So if it's a $200,000 house, we're probably putting $2,000 down. It is very, very hard in our state to lose a deposit. The
Oh.
only way you can really lose a deposit is if the seller can prove that you harmed them, meaning that you had no intention with going through with the transaction, you cost them a
Oh.
mortgage payment, whatever it is. If you have inspections and you don't like what you see and you walk away, or you ask for repairs and they're not willing to do it and you walk away, you have the right to keep that deposit.
Hmm.
Okay. The other thing too is a seller cannot resell a property while a deposit is in limbo. Okay.
Ah, that's good.
So yeah, well, it behooves the seller too to release it, because if you have a $1,500 mortgage payment, you're trying to sell your house, a $2,000 deposit and continual mortgage payments, the math doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
argue over it, right? Pennsylvania is a very buyer and renter friendly state, just in general.
Hmm.
So you get through those you put down the deposit and you're going to hold it typically at the other broker, meaning the listing broker. They'll hold it there and they have to put it in an escrow account. And that escrow account has to be an interest bearing account that is separate from all other monies and not entangled with the broker's money,
Hmm.
right? From there, we book inspections, right? Most agents will call you and say, hey, these are the 2 or 3 vendors that I typically use. Do you have a preference? If you have somebody in
Hmm.
mind, I'm happy to book it. Otherwise, if you want me to, I'll book these and I'll just take the first available. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, it's good to have options and those kind of things. You book the inspections, do the best you can to attend those inspections, right? That's your time to learn about the property. That's your time to get the encyclopedia. Most good inspectors are going to take 2 to 3 hours on a property. And while you're going through it, they'll show you little things like how to operate your AC, how to change the filter on your furnace. They will
Hmm.
teach you how to use your property. An inspector's job is not to catch every problem. Their job is to catch 80% of the problems. Their job is really there to make sure that you're not buying a lemon, right?
Yeah.
Um, they can't anticipate that your toilet's going to break in 6 months. Like they
Yeah.
can't guess at that
Yeah.
stuff.
There's certain things it's like, look, things just happen, and but
Yeah,
to look and be like, yeah, this is definitely a problem, this needs to be fixed, like especially on the big ticket items, it's like, hey, to the best of our ability, yes, this is good, no, this is bad, it needs to be fixed.
bingo. Big ticket items being like a roof, being like a septic, things like that, where there's a lot of dollars behind it, right? And generally how I advise my clients too is an inspector is generally going to find 7 or 8 items, that are flagged that you should address, all of that stuff. Sorry. And the way I frame it to my clients is, hey, if there's a loose toilet and then you have a broken furnace, fix the toilet yourself, get the wrench, tighten the toilet, but let's make sure we get that HVAC checked out by a professional and corrected, because that has money behind it, right? Tightening a toilet, there's not really any kind of money behind it unless there's a bigger problem, right?
Yeah.
So be realistic about what you're asking for so that the things you actually want done are done. Because if you send off a list of 8 items, they're probably going to say, I'll do these 5 things. And they're probably going to be the easier ones versus the 3 or 4 that you actually wanted done.
Got to
right?
prioritize.
Bingo, prioritize. You can't just throw the book at them. So you get through inspections, you're comfortable with what you see, seller agrees to XYZ repairs. Cool, awesome. The way that I personally reply to inspections is I ask for receipts and I ask for it to be done by licensed contractors. The biggest reason that I ask for receipts outside of just proof of it being done is because when you get to the final day of the transaction or the day before, you're going to do what's called a final walkthrough of the property. And you're going to go out there to make sure the property is in the condition in which you put an offer. The reason I like to have the receipts is so that I don't have to take a flashlight and we walk around this happy moment looking for all these repairs that were supposed to be done. That way there's a name and a licensee behind the work that was done, and you can enjoy your moment, right? You can have that giddy feeling and not have to be stressed out about XYZ having not been done, right? Because unfortunately, we're human and we have emotions and we need to embrace those experiences. This is a very high anxiety stress process. That's what it is. That's why I try to be as down to earth and relatable as possible, is because I do not want to add to that stress. It is very stressful. Once you get through the inspections, then you'll have what's called an appraisal. And that is an appraiser. They are an independent party. They are selected blindly from a random pool of appraisers. And that appraiser really works for the bank. They don't necessarily work for you. They go out there to justify value and to make sure the bank is not making a bad investment, which in turn means they're protecting your investment as well to make sure you're not making a bad investment. Because you're borrowing the bulk of the money from the bank. They want to make sure they're not upside down or making a mistake, right? So you go through that process. Hopefully the appraisal comes back good. If not, then it's another negotiation period, just like it's another negotiation period with the repairs. So say it comes in $5,000 short, then you got to negotiate it out. You also would have the right to walk away if the seller's not willing to give, and keep your deposit, right? There's a theme here. In the background, your lenders can be working and asking for you XYZ paperwork while you're going through the process. It's going to be annoying. The lender's going to find things that they need Johnny on the spot. They're going to find random things a week or 2 before. They're like, hey, can you back up this purchase with a bank statement? Like, well, why didn't you ask me that a week ago? And they're like, well, the underwriter just flagged it. That's not my fault, but I need to find it now. That's just the process, and it sucks. It just sucks. You can be the most organized person in the world, but they're still going to ask for something else. Okay. So just have some patience and grace there. The lender's really trying to do the best they can. Do the best you can, too, to use a local lender. It'll give you an edge in the negotiation process. Because there's somebody feet on the ground here who's used to working in the Commonwealth. What I find when I work with a national lender or an out-of-state lender is they always screw up the taxes. They always screw it up.
That makes sense, because if they're not familiar with it, then they wouldn't know all those little ins and outs.
Correct. And it's not just that, too, is when you're working with somebody local, there's somebody who's accountable in front of you, right? It's not just like an 800 number call center. They're like, oh, that's tough, Sally. I'm sorry. Maybe you'll get a house in a year. No, you want the
That.
guy who's going to bust his butt and who feels bad if something goes wrong. You want somebody who's there to be accountable. When you step into the process, you're going to know upfront how much money you need and what your estimated payment is. The lender has to be fairly accurate with an XYZ percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is upfront money that is included in that figure for your cash to close, is what it's referred to as.
Mm-hmm.
So upfront money. So say that the money you need by the end of the transaction is $10,000. I'm just throwing out a figure on a $200,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
You have the deposit down for $2,000 on this $200,000 house. So that is $2,000, 1%. Your appraisal is typically around $500, so up to $2,500. And inspections are typically anywhere from $500 to $1,000, depending on whether it has well or septic. So hypothetically, you could get anywhere from $3,000 to $3,500 upfront on a $200,000 house. However, if it's $10,000 you needed to finish, in all reality, you're only going to need $6,500 if you've already put in $3,500.
Okay.
When you step into real estate, the only money you really have at risk, unless you harm the seller, is your appraisal money and inspection money. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, I just got to tell somebody to walk away from a house.
Yeah.
I just got to say, hey, got to bite the bullet on this one. There's too many problems here. Unfortunately, that is, the money that's typically at risk is your inspection money. The appraisal typically happens after the inspection, so a lot of times you haven't put out that money yet, thankfully.
Yeah.
But there is that risk of lifting up the hood and not liking what you find. And unfortunately, you just get back on the saddle and you go back out there. That's what it is.
Yeah. And it's much better to risk, $500 to $1,000 than, the 200,000 for, the whole thing.
Bingo. Because if you're walking into a bad roof and a bad septic, you could be looking at $40,000, $50,000 right out the gate.
Yeah.
That's terrible, right? So that's part of the process right there. As I mentioned, as you narrow in, most real estate transactions take anywhere from 30 to 60 days. If you're a government loan, it's going to be somewhere between 45 to 60. If you're conventional, it's typically 30 to 45. We do have a shortage of appraisers right now, so most transactions are taking about 45 days, just in general, period.
Yeah.
So after you go through appraisal and inspections, you're kind of in that hurry up and wait mode. Yeah, it sucks. It's what it is. You may not hear from me, but not hearing from me is not bad. That means I have nothing bad to deliver. Once a week, I might just shoot you a message and be like, hey, this is your no update. And that's just so you heard from me, right?
So that way you haven't ghosted and people are sitting there twiddling their thumbs wondering, well, is this good? Is this bad? Is there something I need to get?
Yeah, and I just want to be like, hey, like everything's cool, right? Like it's cool. We're gonna be fine. So I try to do that. Towards the end, the lender, like I said, they'll continually ask you for items, and then the day of or the day before, you'll go do that final walkthrough, and then on the day of settlement, you're gonna sit down at a table for an hour, and you're gonna sign a bunch of paperwork. And at that point, my job is done. Everything's been put into place. The lender's done what they need to do. Everybody's done what they need to do. Everything's been set. In fact, everything's been set for 3 full business days beforehand, because the lender has to issue you your final figures 3 full business days prior to settlement. If they don't, then you're going to get delayed because it is a government law, right?
Yeah.
It's called TRID, Truth in Lending, right? So you'll have all of your figures. You'll know where to wire your money or the amount of check that you need to bring, anything like that, who to go to, all of that stuff. We'll set a settlement. I'll sit back. I'll make jokes. It'll be enjoyable. I'll give you a water and we'll just have fun while you're signing. And then the settlement officer will take control. Players that are involved outside of the lender in this process: inspector, appraiser, and then settlement. So the settlement is the one who issues you what's called title insurance, which is super, super important. So title insurance is your oh crap policy. That's the way to frame it.
I like that. Oh my.
It is a state regulated fee, so they can't puff it up or anything like that. It's required on all government loans, and it's required on all loans below 20%. So it's important, okay? And what title insurance is it's essentially your oh crap policy for Aunt Betty had an interest in that house from 60 years ago, and it actually got transferred illegally.
Oh.
And so what it does is it protects your full investment. Okay. So say you've sunk $100,000 into that and you have a $200,000 loan, it would pay off your loan, you get your $100,000 back. And
Mhm.
then you can also do what's called enhanced title insurance, which I think is 110% of your total investment. But it's required on almost every single loan. So it is important.
Mhm.
I've never run into somebody having to activate it, right? Never.
Mhm.
So it's really there for human error and or title defects and or a bad chain of custody. Okay. Um, the other thing that it's good for is that if there is an issue when you go to sell your property for human error, chain
Mhm.
of custody, all that stuff, if you have title insurance, they're not even going to blank and they're still going to transfer the property because you were protected during that period.
Mhm.
Your title insurance is there for the life of the loan and or your ownership of the property.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
No expiration date. That's nice.
No, not until you're done with the
Mhm.
property.
Yeah.
The other thing too that the title agent does, settlement officer, is they're searching that property for any kind of liens, anything that might
Mhm.
be an encumbrance or an issue like property lines, those kind of things, while you're doing it. Um, we are a property line friendly state, meaning that you do not need a survey to transfer a property. Okay, which is a good thing. Surveys are quite expensive. The
Mhm.
only time I would really ever do a survey is if you're looking at like 10 acres or more, and you're going to
Mhm.
be looking at a very hefty price to get that surveyor done. Okay,
Yeah.
like we're talking $5,000-6,000 minimum. Yeah,
Dang.
yeah, it's a lot. It's quite a lot. Going back to the inspections period, right? So you've finished, you've signed for the house, all of that stuff. Now, the different types of inspections you can do a whole home inspection, which is your kind of top to bottom inspection. They'll jump on the roof, they'll check it out as long as they can reach it. Um, you'll do pest, which is required on most loans. So pest is looking for termites typically, but maybe carpenter ants, those, those kind of
Yeah.
things.
Anything that'll undermine the structural integrity of the house.
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that could really damage the structure. Um, Another one that is one I recommend is radon. So
Mhm.
not a lot of people know what radon is. Radon is a ground emission from dying and decaying earth, and it comes from the lowest point in your home. Okay. The state standard for an acceptable level is a 4.0, which they equate to a cigarette and a half a day, just so you know.
Okay.
Um, Anything over that, you would have a right to request a radon system, meaning that you have a legitimate case to go to the seller and say, hey, you need to install this. Most radon systems are about $1,000. It's just
Mhm.
what it is. If you ever see a reverse downspout on the outside of a house, there's likely a radon system there. Um,
Oh, okay.
mhm.
Okay.
And all it is a cap over the lowest point of your home, which is typically where like your sub pump would be or a pit or anything like that. They cap it
Mhm.
off, they seal it, and then they hook a fan that has a reverse suction and just pipes it
Mhm.
out. Very simple fix. And then
Mhm.
usually they'll get it within a zero or close to a zero. And then they'll put a passive meter on it so that you can see if it's been a factor or the unit's not working. Most
Mhm.
radon systems come with a lifetime warranty. So
Nice.
yeah. The other one is a well test. They just grab a water sample and they drop it off at the lab. You get the readings back. They say this passed, this didn't pass, and
Mhm.
then here's the correction, right?
Yeah.
Septic matters quite a bit. So there's multiple types of septics. There's a holding tank. A holding tank you should avoid in general. A holding tank typically holds about 2 months worth of waste, and then you got to get it pumped. Pumping
Yeah.
anywhere from $250 to $350, depending on how much there is.
Mhm.
Most septics you only need to pump every 3 years. So a holding tank is very expensive to maintain.
Mhm.
And the reason you would go to holding tank is because it means that there's not enough room and or soil to hold or accommodate a drain field and or a septic mound, right? So if you've ever
Yeah.
seen a mound with pipes in it, that's a septic mound.
Mhm. Yeah, we have those at my house actually. Yeah, or where I live currently. Yeah, we've got a sand mound with the little pipes and everything.
Cool. That's the most modern system that they
Mhm.
have, right? So that's not a bad thing. So I would avoid holding tanks in general. Every once in a while,
Mhm.
you're going to fall in love with the property. You can say, I don't care. Well,
You might care in a couple years, but hey, that's your problem.
well, it gets expensive, and it also, it hurts your marketability for the future of the property.
Mhm.
And you have to think about too, when I'm done with this property, am I going to be able to sell it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about those things when you're purchasing. Is am I going to be here 7 or 8 years, and is there somebody who's going to buy it on the back end? You have to think about who your future buyer is, and making sure you find a property that is universal and has features that people would want, right? Drain fields are not really in use anymore, but they still do exist. They were more common in like the 80s and the 90s. Those are underground. You won't see them. A lot of times, though, drain field, think of it like a spider web pushing out in a certain direction, right? So like going forward and down. Sometimes those lines can get clogged and that can create issues. So you want to get drain fields checked for sure. And then a sand mound is pretty obvious. Both drain fields and sand mounds work on like a sand and like stone system to filter out all the stuff and put it back into the ground. If a property has been vacant for a period of time, you also want to do what's called a hydraulic load. And what that is you are dumping like 500 gallons of water down the system and testing the max capacity to see if there's any issues.
Yeah.
So those are the type of inspections. Really, that is it for the buying side. The reality is when you're working with a buyer's agent, there might be an office fee, which is, maybe $400 or $500 for that office, and it goes to the office. But a buyer's agent gets a finder's fee from a seller. So outside of that office fee, your agent is compensated by the seller for finding you a property. So it behooves you to find an agent, especially as a buyer.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
I can't say that the service is free, but I can say that you can get an advocate and then they're compensated by the seller. And you need an advocate. It is not always the best scenario to work. Some people have it in their head that, hey, if I go to the seller's agent, like the listing agent, I'm going to get a better deal. I'm going to get my offer accepted. Agency is established that whoever you are signed up with first, so say the listing agent has been working with the seller and they're under agency, their duty and obligation is to them. So if you walk up as Joe Smo and you say, hey, John from XYZ Real Estate Company, I love this house. I'd love to work with you. I know you're working with the seller, so I think you can get the job done for me. His job is really to get the best deal for the sellers, not necessarily work for you.
Yeah. That feels almost like a conflict of interest there, and that puts the agent in a really rough place.
Well, no. I mean, unfortunately, the way real estate works is if he fulfilled his obligation to the seller, then he did his job.
Because he signed on with them first. So
he is their advocate, not yours. In that situation, he's really just there to perform a function. In terms of the buyer. So as a buyer, go get an advocate, go get somebody who will tell you, hey, this is a great value. This is not a great value. And I'm not saying that, every time is a slam dunk that it could be a bad situation if you work directly with the agent who's representing it. I'm just saying it's a slippery slope. So there's that. As far as selling, we don't have a whole lot of time to jump into it. I got about another 10, 15 minutes. But in terms of selling, the absolute best thing you can do, don't be afraid to interview 2 agents. Don't be afraid to interview 3 agents. Everybody's going to give you a different value. Make sure that agent backs it up with why they have that value for you. Make sure that agent obviously is going to work with you and your rapport and that kind of stuff. And make sure that agent's not just agreeing with the number that you have in your head because they want your listing, right? Make sure they have some validity behind what they're saying. Some agents will walk into a property and say, oh, you think it's worth $250? Great, we'll sell it for $250. But then in 2 weeks, they'll call you and go, hey, we should really have this at $230. We're not getting the action we're supposed to. An agent's job as a listing agent is to only take on something they think they can accomplish. If they know from the start they don't think your house is worth $250 and they take it, that is a conflict of ethics. So we as agents, we're bound not just by law, but also we have an ethical code. Is it ambiguous? Absolutely. Is it set in stone what is ethical and what's not ethical? No, not even close. But it's definitely, again, a slippery slope. Just make sure you have advocacy and you have an agent who's working for you. That's the biggest thing I can emphasize, because there are parts of the process that are just difficult. When you're doing real estate left, right, or center, there's, the way I equate it is you're stepping onto the roller coaster. There is always going to be a bump in the ride, and it's not going to be the kind of bump where you're going to put your hands up and say, wee. No, it's the kind of bump where the agent needs to go figure it out and they need to problem solve. Not only does your agent need to be good at poker when it comes to negotiating, but they also need to be really good at chess. right? They have to be tactical. They have to be able to think on their feet, and they have to be problem solvers. If your agent isn't presenting to you, hey, we could do option A, B, or C, then they're probably not a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, of course, they just come to you with a definitive answer and say, this is a slam dunk. This is how we do it, right?
Yeah.
But make sure you have somebody who's going to be savvy. That's it. You got any questions for me?
Where do you like typically recommend people to look for agents? Like, is there like a database or somewhere where people can find listings of people, or do you just kind of have to bop around on like Realtor.com or something and try to find what's going on?
Sure. Actually, going to Zillow and Realtor is actually the worst way to get an agent.
Gotcha.
That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is agents actually pay to be highlighted on other people's listings.
Okay.
So you might call a random number with John's face on it and get connected to him and assume he's the listing agent and you're getting the information you want to get. But in all reality, John might be paying $50 to $100 for that phone call just to have your information.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a great way to do business. Obviously I would love to help you to be interviewed, but the best way really, ask your friends. Ask your friends for direct referrals. Ask your friends who they've had a nice experience with. Ask your friends somebody who they enjoyed. Don't get caught up in the glitz and the glamour of what, a billboard is or what those things are.
Yeah.
Work with direct referrals. Thankfully, 90% of my business is direct referrals. It's past clients. It's people who worked with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to do it, because somebody's not going to sell you up the river when you have that kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
So just make sure you're comfortable with the person. That's the biggest thing I can tell you. Me personally, I work with one within about an hour of Hanover. My bread and butter areas would be Hanover, Southwest, New Oxford, Gettysburg, Littlestown, a little bit of Fairfield, Spring Grove, Bermudian, Upper Adams, that area, that whole swath. So that line area. If you are looking, say that you're looking in Michigan and you're moving from here, if you have a local agent that you trust and you like, they can go interview an agent for you in Michigan and make sure that you have a good fit.
Oh, okay.
Don't be afraid to ask them to do that. Not only that, but it'll actually help them agent. They do get compensation for pairing somebody with somebody. But also too, if they know you and they've known you for years, they're going to find that right fit for you as well.
Yeah.
So
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Colin. That was very informative. Definitely appreciate it.
Hopefully that's only tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. It sounds like there is a lot more to go into.
There is so much more, and I could talk for days on end. But if anybody just wants to grab a coffee and talk about it, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it.
That's good to hear. Well, thank you so much, Colin. I definitely appreciate it, and for you taking time from being a human to come on Zoom for this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kat.
Yep. Thank you, Colin. You take care. Okay.